Hey everybody, Tosan here. Sorry I have not been really cranking out videos as fast as I want. So I'm going to be making a bunch of guides for stuff I've been playing. So thank you for your patience. First up is going to be this Outlaw Rogue Talent and Azerite trait guide. So that's going to be the first thing on the list. I will make stuff for Hunter as well. I also started playing Demon Hunter again recently. I think it's a little more fun than it was in Legion as far as what talent choices and attacks that you can use primarily. But I'm not sure how long term I'll play it or how fun it'll stay in the long run. But anyway, first up is going to be this, and of course when it comes to specs for Hunter, I've been playing a lot of Marksman Hunter, despite it being obviously the worst of the three specs for PvP. It's pretty good in PvE still, but for PvP it's obviously lacking some stuff. Mainly the really slow casted aim shots. You're having very low mobility because of that in PvP sucks, because it just means you're kind of a punching bag when you're trying to stand there and cast aim shots, whereas the other two specs can be a lot more mobile while dealing their damage. So if you guys want, I will make a guide for Marksman. I played it to about 2200-ish. I haven't gotten to play a whole lot of serious arena yet. So I only played it 1 or 2 nights, and we were about 2200 MMR at the end of it, and it didn't feel terrible. It's really just the fact that your mobility is low, therefore your survivability is low, so it makes it really hard on your freaking healer. So anyway, if you guys want stuff about Marksman, I'll just leave it in the comments, and I'll probably do both Marksman and BM. I'm not really playing survival much, but I will do Marksman and BM if you guys want. So without further ado, here is the Outlaw Rogue Talents and Azerite Trait Guide. Okay, so part of the honor talent choices have to do with the Azerite traits that I'm stacking. So I'll just go over the Azerite trait that I'm stacking first. Now as far as talents go, this is generally what I'd use anyway. I've experimented a lot with various talents, and I've definitely settled on this. Now of course this tier, the defensive tier, it can vary. If you're doing arenas, since you have a healer, usually like elusiveness will be better, or against like rogue, like RMP, which could just stun lock and blow you up really fast. Cheat death would be a good option as well, because elusiveness lost some value because you cannot spam feint. It's a 15-second cooldown now, so you can't just constantly spam feint in anticipation of a stun lock. And even then, an RMP can still kill you in a 2-second DR stun. I've definitely had it happen plenty of times. So cheat death is good against those comps who are going to get locked down and gibbed, and elusiveness would just be good in general in arena with a healer. But for solo play, like random BGs, or just world PvP, or whatever you're doing, I definitely like Iron Stomach. Now, as for the Azerite traits that I'm stacking, it's called Snake Eyes. So, most people think Outlaw is done after the nerfs and that it's super weak and everything, but I will tell you flat out, even after the nerfs, I get top damage in arena at least 90% of the time, if not more. Because the numbers here are not accurate, I don't think. Maybe this one's accurate. A lot of these tooltips are not accurate though, but the way Snake Eyes works is for each combo point spent on Roll the Bones, it causes your next 5 Sinister Strikes to deal X amount of additional damage. So with 3 pieces of Azerite gear with the Snake Eyes trait, this buffs your Sinister Strike by more than double its damage. Its base damage right now for me is 2927, right? It's going to buff it by about 4,500 damage every time I slice and dice or roll the bones. So let me show you. Okay, so my Sinister Strike's not that strong right now. Bad RNG on the weapon master proc, or the double slash. Now I'm going to roll the bones, and this is where Take Your Cut ties in. See, with this build, you're going to roll the bones very often. You're just going to not care about what buffs you get. Unless you roll a 5 buff. I haven't tested it a whole lot, but it seems like if you roll a 5 buff, it's better to keep the 5 buff than to spam reroll for Snake Eyes. It's debatable, because this is a lot of damage, but I think the 5 buff is a little bit more worth it. But generally speaking, you don't care what buffs you get with Roll the Bones, and this is why I like this build as well, because it just feels like it has a good flow to it. You don't have to worry about re-rolling the bones for nothing and wasting combo points to try to get the optimal, buff that you want at any given time. I hate the RNG of Roll the Bones, and with this build, you don't really have to care, because it's all about rolling the bones and not giving a crap about what you get, because you were just doing it to buff your Sinister Strikes over and over. So, roll the bones. 4266 extra damage. So my slice and dices are going to, my Sinister Strikes are going to be huge. Now, see, I have 1 buff left and max combo points. At this point, I would just re-roll anyway and proc it again. 15% haste and super Sinister Strikes. You still use your quick draw procs, okay? You would still use the quick draw procs as you get them most of the time. Unless somebody's really low and you want to burst them in that next global, in which case a slice and dice with a chance to double slash is going to be stronger than the quick draw proc. So generally speaking, you're still going to use the procs to build combo points, and see, I'm already max combo points with 3 procs left. So in this case, you would dispatch rather than re-roll, and then just keep Sinister Striking. And then by the time you get max combo points, you're out of procs, you re-roll again, and so on and so forth. You get huge Sinister Strike. Sinister Strike ends up being around 40% of my total damage in anything, PvE or PvP. You just keep going through your damage rotation. Again, I have 2 procs left, so I'm going to dispatch instead of re-roll and use the last 2 procs, and then re-roll again. And every single time with the Take Your Cut honor talent, you get 15% haste for 8 seconds, which increases your energy regeneration, shortens your globals. It just feels so good. And also, if you get Broadside with this proc, Broadside, and this is pretty much the money proc right here. Ruthless Precision, and oh wow, they changed it from Shark Infested Waters. That's a shame. But Ruthless Precision plus Broadside is actually like the best roll that you can get besides a 5 roll when you get the proc, because this increases your Sinister Strike further by 20% more damage and crit chance by 20%. So this is max damage procs right here. But again, you re-roll anyway. Even if you have those, you don't want to save them because you just want to buff that Sinister Strike over and over. That is the goal, and you will do massive DPS with this in PvP and PvE alike. Now, some people say this is a meme build because it's a 2-button build. It's not a 2-button build. That's absolutely ridiculous because you're still using all of the same abilities you would normally use without Snake Eyes. The only difference is instead of dispatching with 5 combo points all the time, you're only going to dispatch sometimes and you're going to re-roll the bones more often. That's the only difference in this playstyle, is you roll the bones more often than you dispatch. That's it. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same exact playstyle. You're still going to use Between the Eyes and all your utility and all of your, other abilities. That's it. That's the difference. And again, don't care too much about what ability you get when you re-roll. You're just doing it for the Sinister Strike procs. So, that's it for the Azerite traits, and I like to incorporate Take Your Cut. Another bonus of Take Your Cut is its allies get the 15% haste for 8 seconds too. So if you're mindful of that, sometimes I will run a couple of yards over and roll the bones next to my allies so they get the 15% haste buff too. You can give your teammates a lot of haste throughout a match with this talent. So normally I wouldn't say this talent is worth it, because normally you'll roll the bones every now and then, and when you get the buffs you like, you would keep those buffs for a while. But because the Snake Eyes trait encourages you to re-roll the bones a lot, you're going to get a lot more uptime in this haste for you and sometimes your teammates. So, as far as talents go, Quick Draw is the best one, just because it feels good. It makes that global feel a lot more worth it when you get the proc, because without it, it just feels so bad. You're getting 1 combo point and the damage is mediocre. So, this parses the best, it sims the best, rather. So if you, whether it's PvE or PvP, this is going to be the most DPS. Now, you might think with Snake Eyes and getting double Sinister Strikes with the buff, maybe Weapon Master would be better, right? I tried Weapon Master for a while, and it didn't feel good. Ghostly Strike is not going to increase your DPS enough to make it worth having on your bars, especially on a 35-second cooldown. It's just not worth it. Now, on this talent here, usually Retractable Hook or Acrobatic Strikes are your only real choices, because, I mean, if you're snared, 15% extra movement speed isn't really that worth it. I mean, yeah, it feels nice if you're not snared, right? Because you already have a plus 15% base. But Acrobatic Strikes is definitely my preference here. Because, first of all, last expansion, you didn't have Grappling Hook baseline. You had to talent it to have it at all. So now it's a 1-minute cooldown baseline, and all this does is reduce the cooldown. But every time you use combo points, you're reducing the cooldown anyway. So it's not even going to be a full minute cooldown every time, especially if you get True Bearing. So the cooldown really isn't that long, and honestly, especially in Arena or just PvP in general, you do not use it that often that you need a super short cooldown on it. Acrobatic Strikes is so good for so many reasons. It helps you alleviate latency, because sometimes somebody's running around and lagging, like fast classes like Demon Hunter and Feral, and sometimes it's just so hard to melee them because of lag. Acrobatic Strikes makes it so easy to melee people despite lag. So, Acrobatic Strikes, it just feels good, trust me on this one. Another thing too is it catches a lot of people off guard. Say you're chasing a Frost Mage and you're getting snared a lot and it's hard to waddle your way over to him. They get caught off guard a lot because you have an 8-yard range kick and 8-yard range gouge. You're extending the range of your melee abilities, and it feels so good against these kiting classes. They're going to cast a Polymorph 8 yards away from you thinking you're in a Frost Nova and you can't, kick them. And then you're like, boom, kicked, and they're like, what the f. So it's a great ability, trust me, it just feels so good. and you'll still be able to grapple pretty often. Deeper stratagem, so I used to play with Vigor all the time just because energy regen and higher energy in your opener feels good. But because of Take Your Cut and Control is King, usually you're not going to be very energy starved. You know, so especially with some of the buffs you get from Roll the Bones, it's very rare that you feel energy starved, and the extra damage and the extra duration on Deeper Stratagem is really nice. Plus, this synergizes well with your Azerite trait, because again, your Sinister Strikes are empowered based on how many combo points you spend on Slice and Dice or Roll the Bones. So 6 combo points is going to give you more Slice and Dice damage. It's also going to give you a 1 second longer between the eyes stun, which can make or break a lot of situations. So I definitely find Deeper Stratagem to be the best. This tier I already went over. In arenas, Blinding Powder is super good because it makes your blind a 30-yard range, 1.5 minute cooldown, which means if they trinket the first one, they can't trinket the second one. So this will give you like a guaranteed CC opportunity on healers. It's not always the best choice. It depends on what comp you're playing. Like a lot of the time I play with a Shadow Priest or a Boomkin and they Cyclone and Fear a lot. So it's not always the best choice because sometimes you have to grapple with the DR of your teammates. But it's still a generally very good choice in arena. Prey on the Weak is never really bad. It's only 5% increased damage in PvP. But 5% can go a decent way. As we know from the 5% Outlaw nerf, you can feel it. So Prey on the Weak, you know, you can definitely feel that 5% a little bit, but generally speaking, Blinding Powder for Arena is better. Dirty Tricks is really never better than the other two, I don't think. And Prey on the Weak would be your default for like solo play. If I'm just doing BGs or World PvP, I pretty much always default Prey on the Weak. And then in Arena, I will oftentimes take Blinding Powder. Now, this talent tier is pretty obvious. Loaded Dice doesn't matter, especially with the Snake Eyes build. And let's face it, Adrenaline Rush is a pretty long cooldown to just get 2 buffs that you might have gotten anyway. You know, without this trait, because you don't even know. If you Roll the Bones, you might just get 2 buffs anyway, so you getting a guaranteed 2 is not necessarily going to be amazing, because it might just be useless. So I wouldn't ever bank on that talent. Alacrity is just a good constant haste proc that you're going to have, especially in Arena, when you're able to consistently keep the stack up. So Alacrity is definitely the way to go. I did experiment a lot with Slice and Dice. I was using this for a good while at first, because I did not like the RNG of Roll the Bones. But like I said, with this trait stack, you don't really need to worry about the RNG of Roll the Bones, and Roll the Bones definitely feels stronger, especially because of things like Broadside and Shark-Infested Waters, or whatever it's renamed to. You get a lot of buffs that increase raw damage, so although Slice and Dice energy regen feels really nice, and a lot of our damage, you know, a lot of our DPS comes from our melee, our attack. Usually it's going to be like this. Sinister Strike is your #1 damage with this build, and melee will usually be your 2nd highest damage. Almost always. So auto attacks are strong, but again, even with Roll the Bones, you have a chance to roll a 55% attack speed leech, you know, grand melee buff. So you can still get that attack speed sometimes, and frankly, it's just not enough to matter, because most of the time arenas are more about your burst in a, you know, CC chain, less so about raw DPS. So although Slice and Dice is tempting, especially if you hate the RNG of Roll the Bones, with this build, you don't have to care. Just take Alacrity. And then last tier is obviously Killing Spree. Blade Rush is pretty good in PvE because the extra energy regen and the, you know, consistent AoE damage that you can do. But obviously Killing Spree is the best in PvP. When you're energy starved, it's a good filler because by the time Killing Spree is over, you usually have close to full energy. It also breaks roots and snares and stuff like that. So if a Mage Frost Novas you and he's low and you don't have any way out of it, you can just press Killing Spree, do damage, and break the root. So Killing Spree is definitely the way to go. Now as far as the other talents in Arena, I'll usually play Trinket depending on what I'm fighting, but since I'm a human and I have a free stun Trinket, a lot of the time I'll play Relentless. If I wasn't a human rogue, I'd probably play Trinket 90% of the time. And then when it comes to this third talent, I take Drink Up Me Hearties just for an extra big heal in conjunction with Iron Stomach. I can heal myself for 84% of my health between the 2 Crimson Vials. So for solo play, I pretty much always take Drink Up Me Hearties. But in Arena, there's various talent options. You can take Maneuver, pretty much Take Your Cut and Control as King are default. You always keep them with this build. Especially Control as King, you just always have that. But with this build, definitely Take Your Cut as a default. So the third one, you can take Plunder Armor, you can take Dismantle, you can take Maneuverability, or DFA if you want to like stay connected to mages and try to immune some CC. You can take Smoke Bomb. Oftentimes in 3s, I will usually take Thick as Thieves just for that extra 10% damage for me and my teammate very often. So this is the third choice that I take most often. But occasionally I will take Smoke Bomb, or against mages, I will often take Maneuverability because they're so, like Frost Mages are so hard to connect to a lot of the time. So Death from Above or maneuverability is pretty good against Frost Mages. But most of the time, it's going to be Thick as Thieves. So that's pretty much it for the talents, guys. I hope you give this build a try. A lot of people think that Outlaw is super weak after all the nerfs that we got hit with, but trust me, it's still very strong, at least with this build. I haven't really tried, you know, I don't have the other traits to test out yet. I kind of want to test out a triple Storm of Steel build, because each of these it says 371, but it's actually more like 3,000 damage. So with Deeper Stratagem, you know, it says Dispatch does 14k right now. It would do like 23k non-crit, obviously not counting for armor and damage reductions, but I mean, I think Storm of Steel could also be a viable triple trait to stack. In which case you would probably not take this talent, but you know, I'd like to experiment that when I get 3 of them. Right now I don't have 3 of them to stack, but I will update in the future if that is a viable build as well. But trust me, try out the triple Snake Eyes build. I think you're gonna love it. It just feels so smooth. You don't have to care about roll the bones, RNG, and you can give yourself and teammates very consistent 15% haste, which feels so good. So yeah, that's it for this guide. I hope you guys found it useful. Give it a shot. I think you're gonna love it. Thanks for watching as always, and peace out.